Before becoming part of a wall, a kiln, a facade, or an entire city, a brick begins as damp earth. Clay, water, pressure, fire, and time combine in an industrial process that seems simple from the outside, but inside a giant factory functions like a precise, heavy, and surprisingly sophisticated assembly line. The process begins far from the kiln, in the ground where the clay is found. This raw material forms over millions of years from the decomposition of rocks rich in aluminum silicates. Rain, wind, temperature changes, and the chemical action of water fragment the original minerals into extremely fine particles. This fineness is one of the reasons why clay is so useful for making bricks. When mixed with water, it becomes plastic, moldable, and able to retain a defined shape before being fired. In a giant factory, the selection of the clay largely determines the final quality. Technicians analyze its composition before production begins. They look for the right proportions of silica, alumina, iron oxides, carbonates, and organic matter. Each component plays a role. Silica provides stability and reduces warping. Alumina improves plasticity. Iron oxides influence the characteristic reddish color of many bricks. Carbonates can modify the final tone and affect the firing process. Organic matter is burned during the process, which helps create some porosity, although in excess it causes defects. Extraction takes place in open quarries, usually near the factory to reduce transportation costs. Large excavators remove the surface layers of the ground and reach the deposits of usable clay. Loaders then deposit the material into large trucks, which transport it to the plant. In some cases, the factory uses clays from different areas and blends them to achieve a more stable composition. This blending compensates for natural variations in the terrain because clay is never exactly the same from one layer to another. When the clay arrives at the factory, it's not yet ready to be made into bricks. It contains stones, roots, hard lumps, areas that are too damp, and particles of varying sizes. The first industrial stage involves reducing this irregularity. The material is unloaded into feed hoppers, where it begins its journey toward crushers and shredders. These machines break down the large blocks of clay into smaller fragments. The goal is to obtain a manageable, homogeneous mass that is easy to mix. After the initial crushing, the clay passes through roller mills. Two heavy cylinders rotate in opposite directions, crushing the material to a controlled size. Any stones or hard nodules are broken up or separated. In the most advanced factories, sensors and screens remove particles that could cause cracks or warping. A small stone trapped inside a brick can expand during firing, crack the piece, or create a visible stain. This is why cleaning and grinding are so important. The next stage is dosing. The crushed clay is mixed with other materials according to the factory's recipe. Sand may be added to control shrinkage, grog to improve heat resistance, and ash or crushed ceramic waste to adjust texture and behavior in the kiln. Each additive modifies how the piece dries, shrinks, and fires. In an industrial factory, these proportions are measured with automatic feeders, scales, and control systems that maintain a constant flow of materials. Water is an essential element in the mix. Without water, clay behaves like powder or compacted earth. With the right amount, it becomes a plastic mass. However, excess water prolongs drying and increases the risk of cracking. A lack of water makes molding difficult and produces brittle pieces. That's why moisture is precisely controlled. Some plants incorporate steam because the heat helps distribute moisture more evenly and improves the plasticity of the mix. Steam also reduces the energy required during kneading as clay responds more readily to pressure. Once measured, the mixture is transferred to industrial mixers. Inside these machines, large paddles, shafts, and screws continuously stir the clay. The mass is folded upon itself, compressed, and moistened until it acquires a uniform texture. This mixing eliminates dry pockets and distributes the additives throughout the mixture. The quality of this stage is evident in the brick's surface finish and its behavior during drying. A poorly mixed mass produces bricks with weak areas, irregular edges, or internal cracks. The prepared clay reaches the stage where it finally takes on a recognizable shape. In large, modern factories, the most common method is extrusion. The clay mass enters a machine called an extruder, which functions like a continuous press. Inside, a screw propels the clay forward with enormous pressure. The paste moves through a metal cylinder and exits through a die shaped like the brick. This die defines the brick's profile, including its external dimensions and, if applicable, any internal voids. Solid and hollow bricks are manufactured using similar principles, but the die differs completely. To produce hollow bricks, the extruder output includes metal cores that create empty spaces within the clay. These voids reduce weight, improve thermal insulation, and facilitate mortar adhesion. They also allow for savings in raw materials and energy, as there is less mass to dry and fire. Solid bricks, on the other hand, are used when greater density, strength, or thermal inertia is required, although each market and its regulations define their specific applications. The column of clay that emerges from the extruder is called a bar or continuous strip. It comes out with a moist, compact, and still fragile texture. It appears firm, but it can deform if mishandled. Therefore, it moves along conveyor belts designed to support it without crushing it. In this area, the speed must be synchronized with the extrusion pressure. If the belt moves too fast, the bar can stretch and lose dimensions. If it moves too slowly, the material compresses and deforms. The cutting process transforms that continuous bar into individual pieces. First, a system can cut the bar into long segments, called billets. Then, a wire cutter divides each segment into bricks of the exact size. The wires pierce the wet clay quickly, leaving clean faces. In a high-capacity factory, this cutting occurs thousands of times per hour. Each brick emerges with dimensions repeated within tight tolerances, because even a small variation is multiplied on-site when entire walls are erected. Some factories add textures or finishes before drying. Rollers, brushes, molds, or printing systems modify the surface to create rustic, facing, or decorative bricks. Fine sands, slips, or mineral pigments can also be applied to alter the final color. In common bricks, the finish is more functional. In facing bricks, aesthetics become paramount because the brick is exposed on the facade. In both cases, the clay is still raw, and any intervention must be done carefully. After cutting, the bricks are called green bricks. They are uncooked and retain a high moisture content. At this stage, they may appear solid, but their strength is limited. Excessive pressure marks them, a blow breaks them, and rapid drying cracks them. The factory must move them without deforming them. For this, robots, grippers, conveyor belts, elevators, and automated loading systems are used to place the pieces onto special carts, trays, or shelves. Drying is one of the most delicate phases of the entire process. The damp clay must lose water gradually and in a controlled manner. If the surface dries too quickly while the interior remains moist, a shrinkage differential occurs. The outer layer hardens, the center continues to shrink, and cracks appear. This is why factories use industrial dryers, long tunnels, or enclosed chambers where temperature, humidity, and air circulation are controlled. In a tunnel dryer, the bricks move slowly along on trolleys. Hot air circulates between the bricks, gradually extracting the moisture. This air often utilizes residual heat from the kiln, which improves energy efficiency. At the beginning of drying, the temperature is more moderate, and the ambient humidity is kept relatively high to prevent the surface from closing too quickly. As the brick loses water, the air becomes hotter and drier. The process can last several hours or even more than a day, depending on the size, composition, and initial moisture content. During drying, the brick shrinks. This shrinkage is accounted for in the design of the nozzle and the cut. The piece is manufactured slightly larger because it will shrink before reaching the final product. The factory calculates this shrinkage through prior testing. A highly plastic clay may shrink more. A mixture with sand or pre-fired material shrinks less. The goal is that, after drying and firing, the brick will have the correct dimensions. Humidity control is constant. Some plants use sensors to measure water content, thermal cameras to detect cold spots, and automated systems that adjust fans and burners. Air circulation must reach all sides of the brick. If one area receives less airflow, it remains damper. If another receives too much heat, it dries prematurely. The The uniformity of drying defines the quality of the kiln, because a brick with excessive internal moisture can burst during firing when the trapped water turns to steam. Upon leaving the drying room, the bricks are already much stronger than at the beginning, although they do not yet have their final ceramic hardness. They have lost much of their free water, retained their shape, and can be handled more safely. Their color is lighter than the final result, their sound is still muffled, and their structure still belongs to the world of dry clay, not fired ceramic. The profound transformation will occur in the next stage. Before entering the kiln, the bricks undergo visual and mechanical inspections. Warped, cracked, or damaged bricks are removed. In many factories, defective material is returned to the beginning of the process if it hasn't yet been fired. It's crushed, mixed with fresh clay, and reintroduced into production. This internal recycling reduces waste and improves efficiency. The factory uses almost everything possible before the fire renders the clay unusable. Loading the bricks into the kiln is also done with precision. They are stacked on refractory wagons or placed in structures that allow heat and gases to pass through. The way they are arranged influences the firing process. The flames and hot air must circulate between the bricks. A stack that is too compact creates cold spots. A poorly distributed stack results in variations in color and strength. Therefore, the laying machines follow calculated patterns where each separation serves a specific thermal function. Firing is the decisive moment. In the kiln, the dry clay ceases to be simply hardened earth and is transformed into ceramic. Giant factories use tunnel kilns, long, continuous structures along which wagons loaded with thousands of bricks advance. The process works like a thermal line. Dry pieces enter at one end. They reach extreme temperatures in the middle. Fired bricks, now a finished product, emerge at the other. A tunnel kiln can measure tens or even hundreds of meters in length. Inside, there are distinct thermal zones. The first is the preheating zone. There, the bricks are heated gradually. The temperature increases slowly to eliminate any remaining moisture, burn off organic matter, and prepare the piece for the most intense stage. This controlled increase prevents thermal shock. Although the bricks have already passed through the drying area, they can still retain residual moisture in internal pores. If this moisture turns to steam too quickly, the pressure can fracture the piece. As the wagons advance, the temperature rises. Significant chemical changes occur at this stage. Organic matter burns, some minerals lose structural water, and carbonates decompose, releasing carbon dioxide. The clay changes its internal structure. This process must be precisely controlled because each reaction occurs within a specific temperature range. Too rapid a rise can cause defects. Too slow a rise consumes more energy and reduces productivity. The central zone of the kiln is the hottest. Depending on the type of brick and clay used, firing can reach temperatures close to 900, 1000, or even over 1100 degrees Celsius. At this temperature, the particles begin to sinter. This means they partially bond without completely fusing. Some components form a microscopic glassy phase that acts as an internal cement. This phase binds the grains, reduces porosity, and provides strength. The brick acquires its final hardness. The color is also determined in the kiln. Iron oxides produce red, orange, or brown tones depending on the temperature and the amount of oxygen available. In an oxidizing atmosphere, iron tends to produce reddish colors. Under more reducing conditions, darker or bluish tones may appear. The clay composition, the firing time, and the internal environment of the kiln all contribute to color variations. In common bricks, these variations are acceptable within certain limits. In facing bricks, color control is much more demanding. The kiln's energy source can be natural gas, biomass, liquid fuels, or a combination of both, depending on the factory and the region. Burners distribute heat to strategic points, and control systems adjust the temperature in real time. Sensors, thermocouples, and automated programs monitor each zone. The goal is to maintain a stable firing curve. The factory not only needs to reach a maximum temperature, but also needs the brick to remain in each firing phase for the appropriate amount of time. The final strength depends on both the temperature and the duration of the firing process. After the firing zone, the cooling process begins. This phase must also be gradual. A brick that emerges from over 1,000 degrees Celsius and cools suddenly can crack due to thermal stress. The surface and the interior contract at different rates, causing fractures. Therefore, the kiln includes a zone where the heat is reduced in a controlled manner. The air that cools the bricks heats up as it passes through them, and many factories reuse this hot air to supply the drying chamber or preheat the initial zone of the kiln. This recovers energy and reduces overall consumption. When the wagons leave the kiln, the bricks are already fired. Their color is final, their structure is stable.